I have two brothers, and one of my brothers seems to be a magnet for creepy and strange, unexplainable experiences. I want to share this one with you. This happened when he went over to his friend's place for a birthday party. And because it was my brother's friend's birthday, he was invited over that evening for a couple of drinks. The birthday boy was a married man, and his wife and child were there celebrating the day with him. It was a pretty standard birthday, cake, candles, presents, etc. And as the night progressed, the alcohol began to flow and the level of noise grew louder, and the party was in full swing. Since his son likely wasn't having the greatest of fun, and was hardly included in any conversations, at some point without the adults noticing, he went upstairs to presumably play in his room. My brother said he was reminiscing about old times, and the two friends were laughing and just having a great time. Halfway through an anecdote, his son came rushing downstairs and interrupted him. The kid seemed frightened and was making a hell of a noise. He said that while he was playing upstairs, he heard the barking of a dog. The kid kept repeating, "I can hear a dog barking upstairs." Well, apparently pets weren't allowed in the building, and my brother knew that his friend didn't own a dog. He began to wonder if the child had just ruined a surprise present of a pet, but when he looked at his friend's wife's face, he knew that there was no surprise planned. We all kind of thought that the barking could have been coming from a neighbor, as he did have a neighbor upstairs. He wondered if the neighbor could have had a dog and just hidden it really well until now, but his friend's son was adamant that the barking was coming from a closet upstairs. His friend did his best to try and calm his son down, as the little boy was clearly very distressed by what he had heard up there. He intended to prove to his son that there was no dog upstairs, and it was probably just some street noise coming in through an open window. He took his son by the hand, and they began to head up the stairs. He got kind of close to the top of the stairs, and he silently turned back. He sat his son down on the sofa and whispered something to his wife. She then took the boy to another room. His sobbing had started up again. My brother's friend then said to my brother, "There is barking up there, and it definitely is coming from a closet." So with extra courage provided by the alcohol in their systems, they headed upstairs and approached the room where the barking sound was coming from. It was the kids' room. As they drew closer, they realized something disturbing, something that made them stop in their tracks for a moment. Something was different. Oh, it was barking all right, but not a dog barking. It was the sound of a man doing an impression of a dog barking. When they got closer, the fake barking began to get more and more aggressive. They were sweating and really dreading what was beyond the closet door, but they knew they had to open it. Snarls and weird barks grew louder and louder in there. My brother counted to 3 on his fingers silently, and then they whipped the door open. At first they saw nothing, but then they looked down to see a middle-aged man sat down on the floor, staring at them, baring his teeth like a hound would. My brother slammed the door shut on the weirdo and got everyone downstairs and out of the house. They called the police from one of their cell phones and told them that they had an intruder in the house. He said that the police arrived in minutes. In those minutes, they watched the apartment to see if the guy would come out, and he didn't. The police headed straight upstairs and searched all over the place. They came back outside and said there was no one in the house. Naturally, locks were changed and new keys were cut, and they never saw that weirdo again, thankfully. My brother's friend said that after that experience, he would always feel kind of sick in that house, and they just couldn't keep on living there. He wondered if what they saw was an apparition of a spirit rather than a home invader. My brother is convinced that he saw that creep in the flesh and blood. What the hell was he doing in there? It's a creepy and unique experience, I think. This happened when I was in elementary school, when I was out cycling with my friends in the woods by the mountains. We were riding our bikes down a narrow road, and after a while, we saw a woman walking alone up ahead. She didn't really look like she belonged this far out into the woods, and she wasn't dressed for hiking. She wore a skirt, and thinking back on it, she looked like she would be better suited to an office rather than the woods. She was carrying a shopping bag too. I wondered what she was doing out there. We followed behind as the path wasn't wide enough to overtake her. I was really quite curious, and so were my friends. She went up a slope just off of the path. There was a small hut or log cabin up the slope, and we watched her enter. We couldn't believe that someone was living out here in the woods. We spoke about her and her hut for a while, and then headed back down the mountain path and out of the woods. Then about a month later, I was riding my bike through that area again with my friends, and we rode straight past her, so we realized that we must be in the same sort of area as the hut. I had almost forgotten about the day we saw her. We found the slope that led to the hut again, and one of my friends says, "Do you really think she's living in there?" "I don't know, man, maybe," I said. "Well, she's just left, why don't we take a look?" Some of my friends were saying, "No way, and we could get into trouble, what if she comes back?" Others were telling us to stop and how it was a really bad idea. That all went away though when they realized they couldn't overcome their curiosity. We climbed up the slope, leaving our bicycles at the bottom. The slope was really dense with thick grass. We arrived at the hut. The windows were dirty. They were caked in dust and mud. We couldn't see inside very well. We walked around it and found the entrance on the other side. There was a sliding door there. It was at this point some of the more nervous characters in our group were saying things like, "What if she comes back when we're in there? We'll just pretend like we're lost and we were going in there to ask for directions if she catches us." Another replied, "For all you know, someone could be in there." "Well, we should find out then." Everyone was against this idea, but the kid who suggested it ignored us and started knocking on the sliding door. He called out, "Excuse me," as he slid the door open. Everyone stood back, including me. He then made a kind of shocked noise. We all started panicking and asking him what he had seen while trying to look into the hut for ourselves. There was a slim mattress on the dirt ground and a desk in the corner. I saw a set of drawers, but no drawers were in them. The grass and weeds were growing in there. It was like no one lived in there. It was pretty creepy. We went inside and there were a few other things that I noticed. A couple of broken and cracked bowls and plates, scraps of paper and garbage strewn all over the place. I took a look at the desk and noticed that there was something on top of it. It was a picture frame. I picked it up and there was a photo, taken in black and white, of a man. He was wearing round glasses. It looked as if the photo was taken without his knowledge. I started to get a really bad feeling about this place. I wondered what the purpose of it was. I suddenly began to feel like I needed to leave, and quick. It was a place I shouldn't be in. We said that we wouldn't go back there again because it creeped us all out, and to be honest, I kind of forgot about it for a couple of years. Then a few years later, I remembered it, and since I was a little older and a little braver, I decided to try and find it again. I went out to the exact location of it, but I couldn't find any sign of it. It was as if it was never there. I often wonder about the purpose of that hut, and why a seemingly everyday normal young woman would walk all the way out into the woods, into that hut to do whatever she did in there. Was she spying on the man? Was this the place she came to think about him? Was she trying to get away from him? So many questions. The only thing I know is that something was really off about that hut and I really didn't like being in there. I sometimes wonder what we would have found if we lifted up that mattress. A shallow grave? The man with the glasses peering up at us? You can tell I've thought about this for years. Still no answers. I don't believe in ghosts, but I want to share with you a really creepy experience which has swayed me. It happened about 4 years ago when I was living in Kobe, Japan. I worked part-time for a security company. It was a pretty easy and peaceful job. I worked the night shift, but I got a call in the daytime about an auto-lock issue in an apartment building. This happened during Obon. Now, I'm not too sure if you're familiar with Obon, but if you are, please just let me explain it quickly. Obon is an annual Buddhist event for commemorating one's ancestors. It is believed that each year during Obon, the ancestors' spirits return to this world in order to visit their relatives. Obon is mainly observed during August 13th to 16th. The Obon weekend in mid-August is one of Japan's 3 major holiday seasons. So I went to check out the apartment building, wondering if there had been an attempted break-in or something like that. When I got there, I found that there was nothing wrong with the door with the auto-lock. The resident who made the call said that the door opened, so I had to try and find out the cause. I guessed that there was a malfunction with the mechanism which activates the auto-lock, but like I said, there was nothing wrong with it. I wondered if I should call some kind of electrician to take a look at it with me. And that was when I heard a tremendous bang coming from behind me. I turned to see the door swing open with no one standing anywhere near it. There was a mechanical noise, like a button touch pad, that preceded the huge bang. The guy I was working with said that he heard it too. We went over to the touchpad where the residents enter their passcode to enter the building, and when you do this, you see on the display which apartment they live in based on the code that they put in. The apartment code that had been keyed in was for apartment 302, so we looked it up in our records and no one was currently living there. We even went up to that apartment, and there was no one there. It was the weirdest thing. We had no explanation for what happened, and there was no further instances like that. Later, my co-worker did some digging into the previous residents, and it turned out that one of them died during an earthquake. He was convinced that that was the former resident coming back for Obon. Recently, a good friend of mine visited Thailand. He was going to be traveling there for 2 months or so. He decided to get one of the cheapest places he could find to save some money. As with most countries in the world, when you're a tourist, you get spotted and sometimes even targeted. He was pretty switched on though, as he was used to traveling. He said that he made sure the door was locked properly and the windows were shut at night. There was no bathtub in his room, just a shower. He preferred to take a bath, but what can you do? He said that he started to take a shower and he was humming a little tune while he was washing his hair. And while he was washing himself, he heard a voice from outside. Not a voice actually, a chilling scream. He said that it sounded like it came from a woman. It sounded like it was a scream of pain, which evolved into a deep moaning sound. He jumped out of the shower and put a towel around himself. He said that he got the shock of his life when he opened the bathroom door and moved into the hotel room. Someone's fingers and hand were reaching through the gap beneath the hotel door and the floor. A woman's hand. Those were thin fingers. There was a long wire-like object just out of reach from those grasping fingers, and she was trying to get it. The gap beneath the door was bigger than you might expect in a hotel. He didn't notice it straight away, but he should have. It appeared as if the woman was reaching under the gap, and as she had tried to turn her hand over, it had somehow got trapped and caused her to scream in pain. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He tried to compose himself, and he got some clothes on quickly. He shouted at her to get her hand out, and he shook the door handle and stamped at the ground near her fingers. Finally, when he threw his shoulder weight against the door, those fingers finally retracted, and he heard several pairs of feet running off down the hallway. He called the front desk to complain and to ask for a room change, but to his surprise, they didn't really believe his story and told him that he might have seen a ghost. He gave them a hollow laugh in response and told them that it was 100% a human hand trying to get under his door. If it was a ghost, then why would a ghost need a long piece of wire? Something really didn't add up. The front desk didn't offer a room change and told him to go to sleep and not to think about it. My friend had more sense than that. He said that he was leaving and he didn't even ask for his money back. He is convinced that the hotel staff were in on whatever was intended to happen to him. Perhaps that's why the hotel price was so cheap. The woman seemed to know when he was in the shower as well. I guess he got lucky that she screamed in pain. This happened around 20 years ago. After dropping out of high school, I was working a few part-time jobs. They were pretty much consuming every day of my life. The school I attended was one of those super high-pressure ones where everybody's parents are forcing their kids to study all the time so they can graduate and get into all the best universities. All my friends were studying just as much as I was working, I guess, because all the friendships I had at school dwindled away. Maybe they didn't want to hang out with a dropout. Or maybe that's what their parents didn't want either. The only friends I had were the ones I made at work. Most of these friends were on average about 2 years older than me. One night one of these friends mentioned a place in the next city over, which was supposed to be haunted. It was a hotel. He was talking up the idea of all of us going and checking it out. The story goes, the hotel was abandoned during construction due to financial issues. The hotel was close to being fully built, and they just left it. It has been rumored that it's a local hangout for troublemakers and gangs. The rumor goes that there was a kind of lynching in the unused hotel. A woman was beaten and then subsequently killed. There's also a rumor of a suicide from the roof. Again, another female. We all planned to go to see if we could see anything creepy there that night, so I had dinner and I waited for my older friends to come pick me up. We decided to go in the dead of night because, 1, it would be a bit spookier, and 2, hopefully we would be harder to spot by police or curtain-twitching neighbors in the dark. The hotel was located just off a national highway, and thanks to the streetlight and the lights of all the passing cars, we could see pretty well. It seemed like a completely normal hotel, and I was a little disappointed, yet somehow relieved. We snuck in through a broken window and headed to the rooftop. It was then we learned that, even though the hotel looked fully constructed from the outside, there wasn't much of anything on the inside. It was just bare concrete in there. There was no sense of life. It didn't look like it was part of reality almost, like the back rooms, I guess. I still wasn't the least bit scared at this point. None of us claimed to have the second sight either. We couldn't sense the presence of the paranormal at all. And we didn't have any idea of what we were supposed to be looking for. I mean, should we have tried to do a seance or kokori-san or something? We don't know. We didn't know. So we looked around the roof for a while and found a few things. Clearly someone had had a little picnic party up there, and there were signs of something else they might have been up to up there too, if you know what I mean. Finding this stuff caused us to kind of forget why we were there and to try and relax. We began to get a bit louder and a bit more comfortable. We brought alcohol too, so we had a drink on the roof looking out at the lake behind the hotel. It was pretty sweet. We messed around drinking for about 2 hours or so, and then we got bored and decided to go and check out the hotel. I guess the booze had given us a little more confidence. When we got down to the ground floor, we realized that there was a basement we hadn't seen on the first look around. I was quite surprised that we missed it. It was almost as if it suddenly appeared. There was now a bit of an atmosphere in the empty building. We all agreed that something felt different, something we couldn't put our fingers on. One of my friends decided that he would be the first to say, "Let's go down there." So we began our descent into the basement. We went pretty slowly. It was incredibly dark down there. It was narrow and there were puddles of water too. Even though it was summer, it felt downright freezing in that basement. It wasn't like the other rooms in the hotel. We were solely reliant on the light from our flashlights. We approached a door at the end of the passageway. I felt a chill, the likes of which I have never felt before or since, on my back. It was as if this icy chill went straight through me. I remember it as I type these words. It was like a current of electricity that passed through my body. I felt some kind of convulsion, which started from the base of my spine and ran all the way up to my shoulders. As this happened, one of my friends uttered a sharp yelp of horror. I was about to say to everyone, "Hey, let's get out of here," but I found that I couldn't speak. Like I said, there was 4 of us. I was at the front with a friend, and it was one of the 2 at the back who made that yelp. I turned to see him running at full speed back towards the stairs. He was screaming the most maddening scream. It echoed around the narrow passage. It was truly disturbing. I looked at my friend at the front, who was the oldest and I guess was the most confident and strongest out of our little group. He couldn't even keep his composure, and when he started running backwards towards the stairs, I made sure I was right next to him. We didn't stop until we got back to where we parked the car. When we got back to the car, the friend who ran first was still clearly upset and frightened by something. It was really weird to see someone older than you, at that age, literally shake with fear. When he calmed a little, we asked him about what had happened in there, and he said he saw something. He said he saw the face of a woman right at the back of that hallway when he turned around. She was on the right side of the stairs that we had climbed down, in a place that we didn't shine our flashlights when we came down the first time. He said her face was expressionless and blank. He then saw others, a man, another woman. He said there could have been at least 5 or 6 faces. It was like they came right out of the shadows. He said his fight or flight instinct kicked in and he just bolted. Something deep down told him to get out of there as soon as possible. We quickly left the place, even though we didn't see what he did. I'm certain we all experienced that same chill. I'm convinced that we were not alone down there. We went to an all-night restaurant and stayed up until the sun came up, and then we went home. Nothing really changed for me after I went to that hotel. People kept on saying it was haunted, and some say there is a basement, while others vehemently claim that there is no basement. I never went back to find out, so I can't tell you. All I know is, I was in that basement. I moved to a bigger city a few years ago and lost touch with some of my friends I made at work. I did bump into the sister of the friend who saw the faces in the basement, and I asked about him. Sadly, he took his own life, and he was found in a lake by the hotel. He left no note. I often think about that guy, and that hotel, sometimes by choice, and other times not. Last June I had a huge argument with my boyfriend. We were up all night. It was bad, but by the time morning had come around we had managed to resolve things. It was really dumb. We ended up driving around all night since we didn't want to go home because we were mad at each other. He had work that day, so he was really tired and he wanted to go to sleep, so we pulled into a hotel. The hotel wasn't the best. It was worn out and kind of dirty, but it was cheap. I didn't care all that much. It was Sunday, so the hotel was almost completely full. There was only one room available. All the expensive rooms were unavailable, but the cheapest was free. I found it kind of strange. The room was on the 2nd floor, room number 206. We sat down on the bed and began our apologies to one another. And before long we were both smiling again. I heard footfall coming from the room above us, like someone was rushing about. Were they about to check out? We took a bath, dried ourselves, and we were back chatting in the bedroom. I remember facing him and seeing something white fluttering out of the corner of my left eye. It was the strangest thing. When I turned my head to look at it, full on, it was gone. It was pretty weird. My boyfriend noticed and tried looking in the direction he had seen me looking. He looked a little worried himself. But I guess he couldn't see anything like I couldn't. We didn't speak about it. It was really starting to annoy me, but then I heard something coming from the bathroom. It was the sound of dripping water. And once again the sound of someone running upstairs back and forth started up again. I was certain that I'd drained the tub. I always do. Who leaves water in the bath? After about 2 minutes I heard a squeaking sound, then the dripping in the bathroom stopped. I was scared, but I had to go check. I decided to keep this to myself because my boyfriend was so tired, I wasn't even sure he heard it. I looked in the bathroom and there was no water in the tub, and when I checked the tap, it was tight. I couldn't explain what I had heard. This all went down about 2 hours after I started seeing that white fluttering thing in my field of vision. It was still happening. I didn't like that room. I looked at my boyfriend and he looked freaked out. I felt like we both didn't feel like talking about what was happening, because it would have only made it worse. My boyfriend then turned to me and said, "I need to get some sleep. I have work in the morning. This is bad." He rolled over in the bed and almost instantly went to sleep. Not before saying goodnight, of course. There was something incredibly disturbing about the way he said goodnight. It sounded like it was his voice, but another voice was overlapped over it. He was then asleep. Once I heard that voice in the other room with me, I knew that I would be too terrified to sleep. I could still hear those rushing footsteps upstairs. This hotel was seriously creepy. I turned to face my boyfriend in bed, and after a while he suddenly leapt out of bed in shock. He was shouting, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I didn't know what he was talking about or what was happening to him, but it was frightening. His face looked so different. He looked like a complete stranger to me in those moments. And again, I heard that double-lapped voice. His, and one unknown. I pulled him to the door and we left the hotel room. I was getting tearful and frightened for him because he wouldn't snap out of this sleep-like state. I kept calling his name again and again and again, but he wouldn't respond to it at all. It was like he was catatonic. We must have been in that room for no longer than 5 hours, tops. But until we left that room, I heard that crazy non-stop running around upstairs. And when we left the hotel, my boyfriend went back to his usual self. I asked him what happened back there. He said that while he was sleeping, a woman with a terrifying face was looming over him in his dream, and that's why he woke up and started shouting, he guessed. It was a very frightening experience. It's a story I often share with people whenever the topic of horror comes up, because nothing has ever happened to me before or since this incident. Once I mentioned it to someone I work with, and they said they knew something about the hotel we stayed in. Apparently, on the ground where the hotel stands, used to be a house where young girls below the age of 20 were forced to do unspeakable acts for the pleasure of sick old men. The organized crimes are too gruesome to mention. I wonder if there was some sort of residual energy on that ground, perhaps in that very hotel room we stayed in that night. There's also a hospital behind the hotel. Perhaps that could have had some influence on what happened. Anyway, if you ever find yourself in Kagoshima, don't stay in the hotel behind the hospital. Don't stay in room 206.